Hello. So, the video you're about to watch I filmed like 5 months ago and just never bothered to edit. So throughout the video you'll probably see some interspersing of clips that I filmed just now and clips I filmed from back then. So I reread The Elite, which is the second book in the Selection trilogy by Kiera. Oh, and I didn't know this, but apparently she did some sus shit back in the day where she tried to suppress negative reviews of her book. So if I randomly disappear, we'll know why. Now let's talk about why this book sucks. So if you saw my selection video, it was basically a reading blog of me rereading the selection and talking about my thoughts and comments throughout the book. And yeah, I had a lot to say about that book, because that video was 30 minutes long. Arguably too long. So if you're interested, I'd watch that first, because this is going to be a continuation of that. So yeah, just major spoiler warning, because I comment on things throughout the book, and that's also what's going to happen with this video. So if you don't want spoilers, go ahead and click off now. So yeah, just a quick recap about the selection. So basically it takes place in a future America where the American government has been replaced with a monarchy, and they hold something called the selection, which is basically the Bachelor, and it's a competition to find the prince's new bride, and the winner would become the new princess. And meanwhile, there's this bit of subplot going on where there are rebels who keep attacking the palace, and they seem to be looking for something. And basically that was pretty much the only reason I was continuing on with the series, because overall, I thought technique-wise the book wasn't that good, and it was only like mildly entertaining. But I was curious about where they were going with what the rebels were doing, and basically there was this whole weird thing about how their history was taught orally and there weren't any history books. By the way, I should have mentioned, this is not really a reading blog. I've already read the book, because I didn't feel like commenting on stuff throughout. But basically, I'm going to talk about stuff I highlighted in the book while I was reading it, and my thoughts on them. So as far as plot goes for this book, a lot of it is really just America trying to decide between Maxon, the prince, and her ex-boyfriend, Aspen, and that's like most of the book. And to be honest, it got pretty annoying because she is just so fucking indecisive, but more on that later. So as far as the oral history thing goes, they mention it again in this book, and then there's also this one part. Ilya didn't have newspapers like I heard other countries did. We had the report. Magazines were the closest thing we had to printed news, and people like me could never afford them. And I'm like, that sounds like propaganda, buddy. And yeah, that's just like pretty sus to have only one form of news for your entire country. Like, that could not be more obviously propaganda. And yeah, before we get on to more specific complaints, I just have some general comments about random things. Like, there's this one part where the main character, America, is reading from this magazine, and it's just like this opinion piece that someone's writing, I guess. And there's this one line where they're talking about the selection, and they're like, some say it's unfair to force princes to marry women beneath them. And I'm like, yeah, that's definitely what's wrong with the selection. Not that it's classist or sexist or borderline propaganda for the masses. Wow, that rhymed though. Honestly, that should be the slogan for the selection. The selection. Classist, sexist, and propaganda for the masses. Okay, so for this next section, I'm going to talk about race and why the lack of people of color in this story is actually a problem. This story takes place in a future America, a country that is literally built on immigrants, so obviously there should be POC in it. And this should be even more relevant when they're talking about a future America that is more or less supposed to be dystopian and a fucked up political system. I'll talk about this more later, but there's only one character that is even remotely described to be POC, and she's of Asian descent. As far as I've seen, there's no mention of black people or any other POC. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was like, if Cass had included the complexity that was racism in this book, it would have been way more interesting. Because, like, just considering the history of America, America is literally built on racism. And if this book was realistic, which obviously it's not, like, at all, but if she had tried to be more realistic, racism definitely would have been a big part of the caste system. Like, for sure, the lower caste would have been mostly people of color. And honestly, that would have made for a way more interesting story if that was something she had included. Because, like, obviously, having a caste system is bad, and treating people as lower than you is bad. Like, obviously. But the history that America finds out in this book is that Ilya, who the country's named after, supposedly he, like, helped bring America out of darkness during the Fourth World War or whatever, but basically she gets a hold of one of his diaries, and then she finds out that actually he was trying to gain power, and he was like basically a tyrant, and then he designed the caste system to put all the people that were against him in a lower caste so that he could oppress them and keep them below him. But also, like, that's kind of lame. How is it possible that you have that many people who are against you that you can just completely separate them like that, because obviously there are less people of higher caste than there are of lower castes. But how do you have that many people that are against you and then they somehow don't manage to overthrow you? I'm just throwing that out there. But obviously the main point here is that including racism would have made the story way more interesting and, you know, more aware. Because, I mean, I've already said this, like, clearly either cast does not care or does not know enough about just the world and world affairs to have good world building. But honestly, the more I think about it, the whitewashing of America here is like really bad, because like I said, racism is like such a profound part of America's history and even America now. So to just ignore that and not have that be part of the story is ignorant at best. Going back to the magazine article I talked about earlier, there's a part where they interview the king, and yeah, he's a classist asshole. And so he's talking about the contestants, and he's saying how some of them come from less refined castes. And he's talking about his wife, who before the selection was a 4, which is considered a lower caste. And he describes her as one of the rare exceptions to the rule of lower castes. Okay, well, first of all, if he's so against people of lower castes, then why did he marry a 4? But second of all, I'm pretty sure phrases like that have literally been used to describe black people before. You know, one of the good ones. And so, like, it's right there. It's literally right there. She could have so easily connected this story to race, which I think would have made it way more interesting. But no, it's just a petty story about the Bachelor and a bunch of girl hate, with a sprinkling of rebellion so you think it's deep. Okay, so more lighter things. This other part, the main character literally says, and I quote, "I am not like other girls." Like, bruh! This happened. She said it. Sorry, I got really loud there, but I was like, really? She said that with her whole chest. And then there's this one scene towards the end of the book where the main character has been kicked out because the king doesn't want her there. And then so the next day, the main character is walking and about to leave the palace without a scene. And I'll just insert it here if you want to read it, because I'm too lazy to read it for you.
I remembered walking down this grand stairwell the first day, feeling confused and grateful at the same time. There were so many girls then. When I reached the front doors, I paused for a moment. I'd gotten so used to being behind those massive blocks of wood that it almost felt wrong to go through them. I took a deep breath and reached for the handle. America?
But it's just so funny because she's like walking down the staircase and reflecting and being like, oh, it looks just like how it did on the first day of the selection. Like, it's just so funny to me because I can imagine like this slow motion pan as she walks down the stairs and then she's about to open the doors and leave, and then Maston comes and is like, America? And it's so funny. So now I'm gonna talk about more specific topics throughout the book. So the first one is racism. And as I mentioned, there's only one character that's kind of POC in the book, and that's Elise, who's one of the others selected. So apparently she's from New Asia, and it's part of this weird world building that Cass is going on, where countries are combined, like Swenway, which is Sweden, Finland, and Norway. And I was curious, because, you know, Asia is a pretty big country, so I was like, what would New Asia be like? I was just wondering what countries comprised New Asia. Yeah, I just called Asia a country, don't talk to me. Also, is New Asia a country like Swenway, or is it a continent? So I look it up, and it's like, name, New Asia. Location, Asia. Inhabitants, Asians. But yeah, that's not really relevant exactly, but it just goes to show like how little effort she puts in the world building, just saying. Anyway, this first passage I highlighted is just kind of weird. I don't remember the context for this exactly, but it's like a ball or something. And like basically it just says like, Elise's Asian heritage was taken full advantage of. And okay, to be honest, I did kind of assume she was East Asian, so I was like, oh, maybe she's wearing red because red is a really lucky color in Chinese culture. But then there's like a couple lines like describing her outfit, and I don't really get it because the only part that seems kind of Asian to me is the fact that the dress is silk. I mean, this is not really anything. I was just kind of like, this is really weird. And then again, this is not like straight up racism, but I just found these lines kind of sus, you know? Like, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I was just kind of like, Like this one line, Elise didn't typically stand out, and then this other line where it's like, basically Maxon is complaining about Elise, and then I'll just read the line. He's like, I knew from the beginning that I didn't want some girl who would agree with everything I said or just roll over and adore me. I tried to contradict her and she concedes the point. Every time. It's infuriating. It's like she doesn't have a spine. And then there's this other line that I couldn't find, but basically it was saying like Elise isn't really assertive. And I mean, reading it, I was just kind of thinking like, it's just kind of that stereotype where Asian women are submissive. And to be honest, I don't think the author did it on purpose. Again, it's not like outright racism, but I'm just kind of thinking like, it definitely feeds into that stereotype a bit. So it is kind of weird because she's literally the only person of color and she's the only Asian character. And then the one person of color, she kind of resembles some stereotypes. It's kind of sus. Ladies and gentlemen and non-binary folks, this is what we call a microaggression. Okay, I know I mentioned in the other video how the girl hate wasn't really that bad, but I was expecting girl hate. Well, it gets worse in this book. And okay, I say this a lot, but I say it with so much irony and salt. But the phrase, bitchy mean girl. But I'm not gonna say it anymore because, to be honest, even with irony, I don't think it helps. But yeah, Celeste is one of the other selected, and yeah, she embodies that stereotype where she is rich and mean and somehow is able to wrap men around her finger. And I think throughout this book, Cass just really wants to hammer in how she's so manipulative and I guess kind of slut-shaming her because they're saying like she flirts with everyone even though she's only supposed to be romantically involved with Maxon. Like, there's this one line where she gives the king, aka Maxon's dad, a seductive smile, and then America's thinking, it was a little disturbing, where were her boundaries? Yeah, it's just like stuff like that. It's all about how like she cares about makeup, and she's really rude to everyone, and like talks down to them, and blah blah blah, and it's just, bruh. Like, this other line, America's talking to Maxon, and she's like, she's an actress, a fake. You have to be able to see under all that makeup, and the push-up bra is nothing but a girl who wants to manipulate you and get what she wants. Like, could she not be more two-dimensional? Like, there's just one part where the characters have to do a presentation, and there's this whole paragraph describing each of the characters and how they're checking their notes or looking at their books or something like that, just to show, like, they're anticipating the presentations. But then Celeste is checking her makeup. So it's just like, yeah, the same thing. She's just manipulative, and all she cares about is makeup and that kind of shit. And it's like, I'm so tired. This is so tired, man. Like, get some new material, for God's sake. Okay, and then this next one is basically the plot of the entire book, which is America trying to decide between Maxon and Aspen. Like, literally, it got to the point where every other chapter she was switching between the two of them, and I'm just here like, bruh, I'm getting whiplash. Make up your fucking mind. And, okay, kind of aggressive, but like, just hear me out for a second. Like, literally, she's so stupid, because anytime anyone makes any kind of comment about Maxon, America gets like super insecure about their relationship. Like, there's this one part, basically there's this whole thing that Maxim kept building up to America, where he's like, I'm working on something, it's a surprise, and then America is sitting with the other girls in the selection, and she gets a note from Maxon that's like, meet me here. And then of course all the other girls saw that she got a note, and then they're like, oh, is it from Maxon? And she's like, yeah. And then Celeste is like, maybe he's finally kicking her out. And then America starts freaking out. She's like, maybe he was kicking me out. If he wanted to talk to me or spend time with me, wouldn't he have said it differently? And I'm just like, bruh, how stupid are you? Like, literally, this entire time, literally since they first met, it was super obvious that Maxon liked her the most out of all the other girls. And it was pretty clear that he was, like, basically in love with her. And he never said those words exactly, at least in that book and early on in the second book. But it was really obvious that if America were to say yes to him, he would literally drop everything and pick her and just kick everyone else out. But for some reason, despite all this, America does not see that, and I do not understand why. And it's even more stupid because she's so insecure and she will listen to anyone, no matter who it is. Like, it's literally Celeste. She is rude to everyone, especially America, and obviously she wants her out of the competition. So of course she would say something like that. But like, obviously that comment has absolutely no basis. So like, why does America listen to her? Like, I do not understand. You can't see because it's not in frame, but I'm here like, I do not understand. And then of course this part had to happen. Basically, America walks in on Celeste and Maxon making out, and she gets super upset, and she's like, how could I be so stupid? Of course he likes her, blah blah blah, like that kind of shit. And it's like, bruh, it's the fucking Bachelor. Of course he's gonna be making out with other girls. That's like the format of the entire thing. She should know that. Like, where has she been the past whatever months? Like, clearly this is a thing that was going on. And yeah, it's just kind of more of the same thing, so I'm just gonna read the lines and then say my thoughts on it. But like, one of the other things that's going on is basically there's this other girl, Kriss, who's part of the selection, and at some point something happens and she starts getting really close with Maxon, and to the point where it's like America and Kriss could be tied in how much Maxon likes them. And I mean, basically you find out that it's because Kriss wrote a card for him because he was feeling sad about this thing that happened. And then Maxim was like, this is the first time someone has given me a gift throughout this whole selection. And Kriss tells this to America, and then America was like, oh my god, after everything he's given me and all the things he's done for me, I've never even given him anything in return. And I was like, oh my god. Like, literally up until this point, Maxim was really clearly in love with her, and then stuff started happening with Kriss, and America was getting jealous of Kriss. But like, this entire time, she has never given Maxim anything in return, like, after everything he has done for her. So I'm just sitting here like, Kriss deserves Maxim more than she does. Like, you know what? Fuck her. Like, this entire time, America has been like, oh my god, should I pick between Maxim and Aspen? But she's not, like, considering anybody's feelings except her own. Like, to be honest, she's being pretty fucking selfish. Like, at this point, I'm hashtag Team Kriss, okay? Like, boo America. She sucks. But anyway, like, there's this line, she's, like, insecure about the relationship, she's jealous of Kriss, and Maxim, like, makes a joke with America or something, and she's like, he didn't joke with Kriss, did that mean something? And I literally wrote, oh my god, shut up. Like, bruh. And then this happens after America sees Maxim making out with Celeste, and of course America's, like, hella mad at him and feels really shitty, whatever. And so, like, Maxim walks into the room, and then it says, he came across so innocent, so clean in his suit. I had to remind himself that I knew better. I'm like, bruh, seriously? Like, what? And then he, like, looks and smiles at Kriss or something. And then America's narration is like, it was really cruel of him to play with her like that, considering how intimate he was with Celeste. I'm like, what? What? Like, again, what the fuck? What the fuck? Okay, but basically, like I mentioned in passing before, there was this presentation, and then America's presentation is about how the caste system should be eliminated. And part of it is kind of like, oh my god, she's so woke. Like, who would have thought that castes were a bad thing that should be eliminated? Like, what? It's like, yes, queen, you've done it again. Except she didn't do shit. Okay, I did a terrible job talking about this in the original clip, so I'm just gonna read off a bunch of notes that I wrote down, and yeah. So America is doing her presentation about how the caste system should be eliminated, which obviously the king is pissed about because it's radical thinking, spooky. But it gets worse because she references Gregory Ilya's diary, which I mentioned before, no one is supposed to know exists. And it's what the rebels were looking for, I assume. And Maxim was the one who showed it to her. So basically she just exposes Maxim during her presentation. Anyway, the king is hella pissed and he cuts off her presentation because it's being aired live on the report, which again is the one news source for Ilya. And then everyone gets sent back to their rooms. Then later there's a rebel attack and somehow America and Maxim end up in a secret room together, and now they finally get to communicate like normal people. So basically we find out the king has been against America this entire time, and the only reason she hasn't been kicked out yet was because Maxim wanted her to stay on. And we also find out he abuses Maxim, he whips him. And so during the rebel attack, America sees there are fresh cuts on his back. So Maxim getting whipped that latest time was America's fault. Yeah. So Maxim tells her basically that shit she pulled with her presentation was the last straw and the king is kicking her off the selection. So now we go back to the dramatic scene I reenacted for you where she's about to leave the castle forever. She's about to open the door and leave, and then Maxim shows up and he's like, I talked to my dad and convinced him not to kick you off. Basically, she's still in the selection, but there's gonna be some, like, new ground rules or whatever. And then there's this one line that Maxim says, he's like, but what you do not have right now is my trust. And then America's like, I was stricken. What? Like, why is she even surprised? He basically gave her classified information that nobody in the country should know about. And then she proceeds to tell the entire country about it. And that shit she does pisses off the king, and then the king whips Maxim for it. Like, that shit is her fault. And she has the audacity to be surprised that he doesn't trust her as much anymore. Like, bruh. Like, literally, this entire book, it's just kind of like, what is she on? Like, how can she be that stupid? Like, after all this, how, like, stupid and selfish she is, how can I root for her here? And then, of course, afterwards, the king, like, corners her and threatens her, basically. And then he's talking about, like, Maxim and the girls or whatever. He uses the word girls as in plural. And then America's like, girls as in plural? Was he saying that more than what I'd seen in the hall between Maxim and Celeste was happening? And it's just more of the same shit. Like, one, this is the fucking selection. Of course shit like this is happening. And two, it's the fucking king. He hates you. Like, why would you listen to anything he says? Okay, so one last thing. In my last selection video, I predicted based on some foreshadowing that Marlee, who's America's best friend in the selection, is gonna get with this guard. So basically at one point they get caught together, and this is considered treason, so they're whipped publicly in front of the palace members and exiled. But then later you find out that the surprise Maxim was planning for America, the one that I mentioned earlier, was that he managed to sneak them back into the palace in disguise, and now they're working as servants. Anyway, the moral of the story here is pretty clear, right? Well, apparently not, because after this happens, America proceeds to sneak around with Aspen. And I got nothing. Like, literally, why are they so fucking stupid? Did you not just see what happened? Like, I got nothing. They're dumb. That's all I have to say. America's stupid, she's selfish, and I don't like her. Yeah, why am I still reading this? I don't know. But I'm just gonna finish the trilogy and then I'm done. No. But yeah, in conclusion, America is a terrible main character, and world building bad, mild racism. I'm really fucking tired in general, but also of this shit. Yeah, that's all I have to say. Goodbye.